Hello, everybody. Welcome to another IDC WIN presentation today. I hope everybody is well. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're tuning in from. We have another great session. I'd like to introduce today's guest speaker, and I know many of you already know Eric, but I'm just going to give a quick little background for those who are not familiar. Eric Wachtel is our National Compliance Officer here at IDC WIN Big. IDC World Source Insurance Network. Eric is responsible for maintaining and strengthening IDC WIN's compliance programs and initiatives with over 20 years of experience in the life insurance industry and joining IDC back in 2001. Eric is also the compliance chair in legislative affairs for CALBA and is a huge voice in our industry and in compliance in general. And that has made IDC WIN a huge respected player in the industry. So without further ado, Eric, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. I see you did some homework there, so I appreciate that.
I feel like I was introducing Tiger Woods there for a second.
Yeah.
And last point too, guys, please feel free to use the Q&A function. We'd like this to be as interactive as possible. So I will jump in with any questions as I see them come in for Eric. So sorry, Eric, go over to you.
So, thanks, Brett. Thanks, everybody, for taking time out of your day to visit with us. Allow me to go over some of the important aspects of compliance. As Brett mentioned, I've gotten around showing this at the Vice President's conferences, East and West, but I've not had a chance to show it to the general population. So I'm happy to have a chance to do that. I'm just going to cue that up right now. So by now, everybody should be seeing my screen. Okay, great. So yeah, some of this will be a review, but I will, and you know what? Review is not a bad thing, because one of my pet is where there is always something new on compliance, and you haven't even caught up to the old stuff yet. And there always seems to be something new that's on the horizon, and it shouldn't be like that. It should be very, very, there's just a few things that you need to know, and we just want to impress those things on you so you can go on with your day-to-day business. So first of all, again, many of you have seen this before. I won't take too much time on it, but I talk a lot about the bridge without rails. I've had advisors use this in client presentations just as a metaphor to show people the value of the work we do and how a lot of the protections we afford to Canadians are kind of in the background, not fully visible, but they're there nonetheless. And our job as salespeople is to let advisors know about these things and let clients know that these things exist.
Yeah, so one question early on was asking if IDC has any partnerships with cybersecurity consultants who deal with small to mid-sized businesses, and that could provide a discount. I know cybersecurity is becoming a more pressing issue in today's climate. Do you have any commentary on that?
Yeah, I do actually, in two respects. That's a good question. So first of all, we've had a long-standing partnership with NPC DataGuard. They are kind of a marquee cyber solution for, business owners everywhere from the one man or one woman shop all the way up to, an office of 5, 10, 15, 20 people. So they lease cybersecure equipment. Again, they're considered the best in the business. For someone who wants to stop rolling the dice and trying to figure out cybersecurity on their own, there's a top shelf solution for you. And you can get on our website and find plenty of information about NPC, and of course, contact Lisa Friesen for more. Also, just more generally, Brett, I was recently attended the CALBA conference, Canadian Association of Life Insurance Brokerage Agencies. And I was one of the speakers, and I did take note that in the audience there, we had some compliance consultants. And these consultants are, specialists in the field of compliance, So if you're an AGA, I mean, I was speaking more to the audience of MGAs, smaller MGAs, who maybe don't have the in-house compliance expertise they want to have. And, so just a note that there are compliance specialists who are for hire, and they can also, give you feedback with respect to cybersecurity and things like that. So that's a great question.
Yeah, that's great, and I think that's going to be becoming more prevalent as we continue on here. So that's great news, Eric.
Yeah.
There's sort of two questions revolving around auditing. We know audits are starting to be conducted by insurance carriers. So the first part of this question is, on the advisor disclosure form, do we need to indicate which MGA the advisor is with? Is that a regulatory requirement?
So it's not a regulatory requirement, but CLHIA, Canadian Life and Health Insurance Association, is requesting that. Now, boots on the ground, we have advisors, Brett, as you know, who experience or undergo advisor practice reviews. We call them APRs. You can see them on the screen. So this is where, an Empire Life or a Sun Life, or right now it's Canada Life, who's selected 66 advisors within IDC. They will not come out, but they'll send you an audit request, a review request. It's a questionnaire to complete, and they'll ask for evidence from, 5 or 6 client files that you have with Canada Life. So, part of that review process is they want to see, like in your client files, they want to see that client signed advisor disclosure, client signed client engagement letter, financial needs analysis to measure what their insurance need was, and reason why letter. So those are the 4 main things they look for. Most of the advisors I've seen, they don't have the MGA name at the top, and they haven't been called out for it. So I know that's a bit of a wishy-washy answer, but the fact is there are still some advisors who deal with more than one MGA, and as well, the advisor recognizes and appreciates that, wow, I might be with Hub this year and I did 100 cases and all my cases said Hub. I moved to IDC. Oh my gosh, do I have to repaper these people? So I'm not seeing that the auditors from the carriers themselves are making a big deal of it. And I'm not seeing that audits at the regulator level are making a big deal of it, but, stay tuned.
Yeah, no, that's great. And if anybody has any further clarification on that, reach out to your local BDE and they'd be happy to look into that with you as well.
So I just want to, again, this is a high level, my philosophy, Brett. Compliance is important, but it shouldn't be complicated.
Yes.
There's just, a few things you need to know and drill on those things and make sure you're doing them. Exercise your willpower, get the systems in place you need. So that's what I want to show you today. One of the tools at your disposal is our wonderful idcwinbig.ca website. Those of you who have used it and use it regularly, and we have some big users who are literally hopping on there hundreds of times a month. You'd be familiar with Lisa Friesen and Wendy Carazor. They're our digital specialists who are always available at that little round box at the bottom right corner if you have a question. But when you get in here, you've got access to, you see the first check mark on the left, which is our kind of 1.0, our old website, which still has lots of great materials on it and forms and things like that. Then you have our educational website, the IDC WIN Institute. There's where you can take courses, get your CE credits, things like that. And I tell you, this is the envy of a lot of MGAs out there. They always say, wow, your system is great. And then you see the search, which is really like the Google of our industry. You pop in there and there's just a search window and you ask your question. It could be, hey, what is my unlicensed assistant allowed to do for me? Boom, you'll see some of the best articles that we've written on that topic and some of the guidance that's been issued by insurance companies on that topic. So right here, you have kind of a window to the compliance world and a lot of tools to help you. Now, what I'm showing you now is the actual first one, which is our 1.0 website, kind of traditional with the tabs across the top. What you're seeing on the screen is the IDC WIN weekly bulletin. And you see, this was an older screen print I did, but we archive all our bulletins. But what I'm really excited about is now under compliance, like these bulletins will be general bulletins, that we send out once a week. And occasionally, as needed, I will include a piece of compliance guidance on that bulletin. And so far this year, I think we've done 4 or 5 of them. But what I asked Lisa and Wendy is, hey, you know what? It's great that there's an archive of our bulletins here, but sometimes an advisor, like, let's say she's just been notified that, Empire Life wants to perform a practice review on her practice, and she wants to review some of the recent compliance bulletins. So what Wendy and Lisa have done is they've pulled out the compliance bulletins, and if you hit the compliance tab, you'll see those bulletins there. And, reach out to Lisa and Wendy if you're not quite getting them, but that's something we wanted to offer, because I don't want you to have to search through all these bulletins to, I know Eric sent out something. I didn't pay attention to it 6 months ago, but I think I need it now. Let me go in and review it. So, if I may, one of the key takeaways, if you were going to write down one or, like 5 things from this presentation today, one thing would be tune into the weekly bulletin. Okay. We've got a good open rate on this. I'm not going to quote a number, but it's, better than industry average, but there's still a lot of people not reading these. And I'll tell you, when I have a broker who is suddenly in some compliance hot water, they're being audited, they're not sure on the requirements. There's various types of issues they're experiencing. And I ask, have you read the weekly bulletins? The answer is, what are those? So again, if I gave you one tip today, it's, look, if there's anything you need to know about compliance, it's in these bulletins, okay? And you can go back and read the archives and get yourself up to date. This is a look at the courses, just as an example. You can click on whatever you're interested in and take the course, get your CE credits. And this is the search bar that I talked about before. So just want to talk about industry complaints. And this, as you may know, FSRA, the Financial Services Regulatory Authority of Ontario, has kind of taken a lead position within CCIR, the Canadian Council of Insurance Regulators. So CCIR is really the Association of Provincial Regulators, right? They get together and share topics. And Quebec, the AMF in Quebec was formerly kind of driving that bus. Now FSRA is taking over. So, they're trying to share the workload. And FSRA performed some very deep dive studies into our industry just recently. And if you haven't seen this, look it up. But there was a report released by FSRA of advisor discipline. And FSRA has a new reporting conduit. So if you go on FSRA's website, you can look up your license and everything, but you'll see there's a big yellow consumer button to hit for consumers to complain as well. So, you want to be aware this exists. Also, there used to be something called a life agent reporting form, a LARF. And this was created by CLHIA, but it was a standard form that insurance companies would complete if they had a high-level complaint with an advisor and they had audited that advisor and found a lot of deficiencies. That's what they would file with the regulator, is a LARF. Well, that was a paper form. You'd upload it. It was kind of a black hole with the old FSCO regime. Never really went anywhere. But FSRA has just released their new form, and the acronym is LAMR. And you can remember that because it rhymes with hammer. So, but it stands for Life Agent Market Conduct Report, I believe. But it's the same thing. It's where the industry will file a report. And let me tell you, FSRA is taking this very seriously. And FSRA has kind of spoken to the industry saying that, look, if we get some consumer complaints And we investigate these complaints because it's easier than ever now for consumers to say, hey, I feel like something's not right and I'm not getting answers that I want. And they complain to the regulator, and the regulator reviews that complaint, and then they see some egregious, obvious things the insurer should have noticed, or the MGA. They're going to have hard questions for the industry about, okay, Sun Life, Manulife, Canada Life, why didn't you file a LAMR with us? You know, there was some obvious conduct issues here. So, you know, it's just something to be aware of, that they're starting to get big data working for them in the background, connect complaints together, look for trends, and that's how they want to improve fair treatment of consumers in the marketplace. Because you know what? 99% of us, we all want to do the right thing. We love seeing clients fairly treated. We love it when they're covered and their products do well for them and then save them when something goes wrong in their family. But, you know, we hate it when we see that odd advisor misbehaving, obviously. And so the regulator's trying to get aligned and get ahead of that. So, you know, put FSRA on your radar. If you're not on their mailing list, you should be, and there's a way to do that. But as a licensee, you should be on their mailing list. If you're from another province, again, because they are, you know, kind of driving the CCIR bus now and conducting studies on our industry, you should be aware of what they're publishing. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this life wheel. I want to focus on solutions and things you can do in your practice to prepare yourself. So I alluded to a little while ago the APRs, Advisor Practice Reviews. So FSRA did conduct a study of distribution in Canada. It was I call it a university level study. They have some very smart policy people, and they've hired from within the industry as well. And they created this thematic review of market conduct, which again is a report you can review, you can Google. But what they found is that insurers do not proactively risk assess their agents contracted through MGAs, nor do they conduct a meaningful volume of agent practice reviews. So these are the APRs. And if you haven't been APR'd yet, you know, you should start realizing that, okay, chances are I will be. If I look at a company like Canada Life, their criteria for choosing which advisors to APR this year was simply volume of cases. No complexity there, right? If you wrote 20, 30, 50 cases with Canada Life, chances are you're on their radar. And that's just, you know, they have to choose somehow. In previous years, it might have been on, you know, size of premium or something like that. Next year, it might be, you know, IFAs. Let's look at some more complex strategies, YRTs, RCAs, RFAs, and see how those are being sold. So let's choose advisors who are doing a lot of those. So you can start to think in those terms of how likely it will be that you're selected for an APR, but also, you know, realize it's not an if, it's a when. Here you see the regulator, FSRA and CCIR, saying to insurance companies, oh, you reviewed 60 advisors from this MGA. Why didn't you review 200 from this MGA? So that's the type of thinking that's going on. So what do you need in your practice, in your business to be compliant? Thankfully, you only need two things. Your practice has to be compliant. That means you have the proper and required manuals in place. Your anti-money laundering manual, your privacy manual, and built into that privacy manual would be your cybersecurity stuff and what you're doing and what you're investing in your practice to protect client data from cyber theft. Your market conduct, general compliance manual, and of course your proof of your E&O, CE, and holding out. All of these are available on our website. These templates are available, like an AML template, a privacy template, a market conduct template. You can customize it, just kind of tidied up here and there to make sure it's applicable to your practice. And if you want to visit this whole topic, we have a course called the IDC WIN Compliance Course number 6, parts 1 and 2, that explain how these manuals are used and then provide you with the templates. Okay. Secondly, the second thing you have to have in your business to pass an advisor practice review is your client files have to be compliant. And I'll show you in a second what that means. The star in the middle there is a PEXA. And I put that there on purpose because you can upload your manuals into a PEXA. You can upload not your client files, but your template, your client compliance forms. Like you have a standard advisor disclosure, you can upload that to a PEXA. So some advisors just like having, you know what, I got a place where this stuff is stored. And a PEXA is improving to the point where if you are selected for audit, again, I'm not sure which software release it'll be, but you could direct the compliance official at that carrier to your PEXA profile and say, hey, guess what? My AML, my privacy, they're already uploaded there. I update them every 2 years as required by law, as required by the Proceeds of Crime, Money Laundering, Terrorist Financing Act, and as required by privacy law. And I upload a fresh copy every 2 years. So it's there for your review anytime. That's the place we want to get to with that. So what does it take for your client files to be compliant? Here you see it on the screen. So these are the 7 elements of a compliant client file. The big ones, the ones that, you want to have in all cases. And I've seen that FSRA, and I'm sure other regulators are focused on these as well. You want to have good evidence that your client was given your advisor disclosure and your privacy consent. Okay, and I want to stop there. Privacy consent is important. A lot of advisors think, well, I have a privacy manual. No, but your clients need to sign a privacy consent form. And that kind of addresses CASL 2, Canadian anti-spam legislation, where they're consenting to you sending them commercial electronic messages and marketing to them. So our template accomplishes all that. But, some advisors think, well, the application I complete has privacy. If I'm selling them a BMO life insurance product, the application, the client's consenting. Well, not necessarily. Some carrier, and as I recall, BMO's consent language includes advisor and MGA, but some of them don't. So, and even before you get to doing an application with someone, you're collecting a lot of private details before you even put pen to paper and do an application for a product. You're collecting their date of birth, you're doing fact finding, all kinds of things. So you have to have the client consent, okay? Next is client engagement letter. That's a big one for the regulators too, because why? Because a client engagement means there was a clear understanding between me and my client in terms of what I do, what I don't do, and what the client needs to do. And advisor disclosure doesn't really do that. Advisor disclosure is just, hey, Mr. Client, this is me. These are the insurance companies I'm I'm contracted with to deliver product to you for. Here's how I'm paid. Here's how I deal with conflicts of interest. An engagement is a two-way document. Mr. Client, here's how we're going to work together. These are the areas I cover. These are the areas I don't cover. If you want advice on those areas, maybe I can give you a referral. Here's what you do, Mr. Client. You need to update me. You need to read your mail. You need to, if you ever have a question, you're not clear on a product that you've purchased from me, you need to ask me, things like that. So it's a very effective document, and it helps you when a complaint occurs and a client is claiming they didn't even understand what you were selling them and what the terms of this working relationship was. Okay. So that's the second big one. Then you have needs assessment for life insurance or any type of insurance product, and a risk tolerance questionnaire if it's an investment product. Something where you're quantifying and measuring what this client needs. And, by the way, if the client needs $1 million and they own, according to your calculation, and they only take 500,000, that's perfectly fine, because your needs analysis would have the client, yep, okay, I've recommended 1 million. You've chosen 500,000, which it's a free country. That's wonderful. You did that. Some people don't even have 100,000 coverage because of budgetary restrictions or whatever. You've decided to fulfill half the need. Wonderful. It's just that their signature denotes that they're aware there's still a shortfall. So if that person dies and the adult children are saying, why wasn't mom and dad insured properly? Well, here I told them what they needed. for this capital gain. For personal reasons, they chose this amount. This is what we have, but it was clearly documented. I didn't make a mistake here. That's what you're trying to prove to anyone who wants to dig into this. And then finally, of the big four is the reason why letter. And I mean, I could drone on and on about this, but one of our compliance bulletins, and certainly if you go onto our search button and you type in reason why letters, we have some very good templates, templates that I've drafted personally, templates that were for real life scenarios. And real life scenarios are never perfect, right? They're back and forth and this and that. And Mr. Client, you know, you wanted this. I told you you should have this much coverage. You said you only want this much. We proceeded to an application. Oops, one of you got rated. We had to review again. Then you decided to adjust this. And by the way, we're replacing your old plan that was doing that. And this one's doing better as per the life insurance replacement declaration we completed. So it's basically a little summary, a book report of what you did for the client and next steps. And by the way, you know what? Let's get in touch with each other again next year, see if we can address this shortfall of coverage or whatever. So it's a hugely powerful tool to make consumers feel good, to realize that, wow, their 16-year-old kid could pull this out of a file if you were in a coma and understand what mom and dad did and how they're covered and how they're not covered. And in a complaint scenario, it allows you to say, look, I'm very sorry the client's not happy, but they were very clear on what they had. And I even explained it to them. At the end of my reason why letter, I invited them to ask me questions if they weren't clear. So very, very powerful. Those are the four things you really have to have. The others are part of the approach. They're recommended: fact finding, supporting notes, having a list of the recommendations you gave to the client. You know, sometimes these are more pertinent for more complex cases. Like if I'm selling Brett, you know, mortgage life insurance, not, you know, do I need a list of recommendations? Not really. The needs analysis said you need this much. My reason why letter described how, hey, Brett, because of this or that, you decided to go with a 20-year term for now. Maybe in the future, we'll talk about converting part of that to permanent insurance. You know, it doesn't require a huge list of recommendations there. So I think, Brett, I'll just pause and see if maybe there's some more questions.
Yeah, that's great, Eric. There's actually a ton that are coming in here, and they cover a variety of different topics. So so I can just start listing them off for you here.
And I just wanted to check, you know, whenever Lisa's maybe able to chime in. I think we're good till 2 p.m. But if you know, I can go longer. But I'm sorry about that technical glitch at the beginning. But whenever you guys say, just let me know so I know how much time I have left.
Hi, Eric. I'll just let you know we can go beyond 2 o'clock. So or 2 o'clock. Yeah, 2 o'clock. If we can go beyond 2 o'clock, if you're comfortable doing that, there's no hard stop on this.
Yeah, I'll go 2:15. I certainly don't want to, you know, punish the people that maybe have meetings after that. I don't want them to feel like they're missing out, but I'll go 2:15.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks.
So going off of the last question that I had stated, Eric, do all companies conduct compliance audits, or is it only a few currently?
Great question again. All of them are supposed to. Now, supposed to by whom? The answer is by the Canadian Life and Health Insurance Association. So, you know, keeping in mind that that's an association, kind of like a self-regulatory organization. And this is you know, insurance companies form their own association, and they CLHA puts out guidance, you know, best practices that they would like the industry to follow. So, you know, all insurance companies are supposed to, and really, this is also driven by a February 2017 directive from CCIR. So in that year, Canadian Council of Insurance Regulators came out with an annual report of market conduct, which is, as I understand it, close to 100 pages, a questionnaire that each insurance company has to complete and send to CCIR. And that report, the carriers basically have to say, here's what we're doing to monitor and audit advisors. So, back in 2017, many carriers said, sorry, but we can't complete this. We don't have the data, which was fine. But the response was back, well, you better start collecting the data. And that's kind of one of the driving forces that birthed this APR process. Insurance companies, they're not sitting around twiddling their thumbs, nothing to do, and say, hey, let's go audit some. They are kind of required to do this so they can adequately complete that annual statement of market conduct. So that's the answer to that, Brett.
Perfect. And I'm actually going to jump down a few questions just to stay on this topic. And obviously, none of our advisors, they are going to follow all the processes. We have one of the best in the industry leading the way for us. But what happens if an advisor does fail an APR?
Yeah, that's great as well. I call the APRs the friendly audits. And some insurance carriers get mad at me when I call it an audit. They go, it's not an audit, it's a review. Okay, it's a review. But underline friendly. Yeah, that's why they don't call it an audit, because we've had here on your screen, you see a Canada Life report for an advisor, obviously name removed. This advisor fared fairly well. They got dark green and light green. Yellows and reds are the ones you want to stay away from. We've seen advisors who get reds all the way through. And the carrier will, no one's throwing a book, no one's canceling your contract, but they say, okay, here's where you need to fix your practice. Work with your MGA. If you need help from us, work with us. And what we found is that these companies are now coming back to the same advisor the year after or 2 years later and saying, hey, we had that review with you. You did kind of fail in a few areas. We want to review you again to see if you actually did that. So someone who fails, typically the carrier will say, okay, you didn't have a privacy manual. Please complete it and get it to us within 3 weeks, audit closed. But then 2 years later, they will pick that advisor again to see, okay, did you do that privacy manual and throw it in your drawer? Or did you actually embrace the process, learn from it, and you've actually done a refresh of your privacy manual, which again, privacy law requires you to do every 2 years. So they do come back now, but it's still friendly, but the second time around, not so friendly. You can start to get some contractual restrictions if you fail 2 of these in a row with a carrier. And by the way, if your provincial regulator audited you, the result would be the same. So the carrier's kind of saying to you, look, if you failed with us, you'd fail with your auditor, and that would result in sanctions on your license. So we're here to help you. That's how, that's the background of that.
Good. So take those as a warning sign and improve upon it. And that's what they'd like to see. So that's perfect. Eric, there's tons of questions here. So for the next actually subset of them, they're sort of revolving around processes. So I'm going to do a rapid fire sort of question answer, but please feel free to expand if you'd like to. So first question would be, can the advisor disclosure and engagement letter be combined into one document, or do they need to be separate?
They can be combined. And in fact, Empire Life had a good combination document that was advisor disclosure, engagement letter, and even a bit of fact finding. So provided you have sign off on each individual section, you're good.
Perfect. Okay, great. And another question there is the needs analysis in our partner life design analysis enough for compliance?
Yes, a lot of financial planning tools will have a built-in, calculators for needs analysis. Perfectly fine. Again, get some type of acknowledgement from the client. And this is a great place for me to insert, Brett, that many of you advisors, you're doing electronic applications. They're great things, right? Bright new age of e-apps. And many of the carriers allow you to upload documents to those electronic applications. So I'm thinking of a Manulife right now. And, you can upload whatever you want. Well, you know what? We actually did some piloting where the advisor uploaded his disclosure and his engagement letter and his reason why letter, because by the time you get to the application stage, you kind of know the reason why you're doing this. And he said, hey, let me draft it now and do this, uploaded it. And actually, we asked an audit leader at FISRA and said, if you were auditing an advisor and they had a copy of this electronic application in their file, And it showed that, these were the attachments that were there. Would that satisfy you guys? And he said, you know what, that would be great evidence for us.
Yeah.
We would, and in fact, what you learn is that, when you upload stuff to an electronic application and the client signs at the end, I've asked several carriers, I know this is a little anecdotal, but I've asked several carriers and they go, yeah, the client is deemed to have agreed with whatever, review the application, attach your signature here if everything is correct, Mr. Client.
Yes.
He or she is deemed to have reviewed that. And we always say to the client, you know what, save a copy, once you sign, Mrs. Client, you're allowed to download a copy. And you'll see my advisor disclosure, everything there for your own safekeeping. So it's a nifty tool. FSRO is actually impressed that the industry can do that. You'll notice with some carriers like Manulife, they don't have a field called advisor disclosure. I'm telling them, hey guys, you should insert a field for that. And that's the direction I think we're going in the industry, because I know it can be hard to get acknowledgement for these documents from clients when you're dealing virtually.
And virtually is becoming the new norm in the industry, as everybody knows on the call. So, relating to advisor disclosure forms or privacy statements, or even reason why letters, can those be signed using your dedicated DocuSign account as well?
Absolutely. I mean, DocuSign considered to be, and I know different carriers, like I know Desjardins, I think, put out a document about different e-signature platforms and which ones they approve. But, these are not contractual documents. These are, hey, attach your signature. Let me, you did something, Mr. Client. You ticked a box, and that's totally fine, Brett. DocuSign I'd call that a top drawer solution.
And reason why letters, do those need to be signed as well, or can that just be submitted?
They don't need to be signed, strictly speaking, but every advisor I've talked to who has actually gotten into doing them says I get them signed. Or even if it's if I'm sending a DocuSign, I add the reason why letter.
Yeah,
their little stamp or initial at the end of it is just gold for me, because it proves that, hey, they got it and they read it enough to actually click it.
And part of that conversation. That's great. So actually, we actually have a comment from Wendy Kurzori, and I'm thinking that you can expand on this a little bit as well. So oftentimes, advisors think that the privacy statement on their advisor disclosure is their privacy policies and procedures manual. But that is not the case, correct? So can you expand on that a little bit further, Eric?
Yeah, thanks, Brett. I've always wanted to go public with this one.
Okay, there you go. Floor is yours.
There's 3 titles of documents I've heard with respect to privacy. Okay. One is your privacy compliance manual. That is a manual that should make a thud when it hits the table, because it contains procedures. It's not for client viewing. This is you as a business person and a collector of highly private and confidential client data that informs you and your staff how you collect, retain, protect, and share client information. It has a privacy breach procedure. Step 1, step 2, step 3 is what I do if a breach occurs, if I become aware of a breach. So that's an internal document to your practice. That's required by law. You have to update it every 2 years. And by updated, I mean, like you, if you're a one-man or one-woman show, you designate yourself as the privacy officer, and every 2 years you sign off. You do a review and you say, no changes, signed on this date, or yes, we've added this and that to reflect updates and provincial or federal acts of privacy, and you do it. Now, we have the templates for that. They're updated. Those are provided by Canada Life. They do a great job of that. So that's one document. Then there's a smaller document, which is maybe 3 or 4 pages. That's a privacy statement. This is something you'll see advisors post to their website. And it's basically a statement that, hey, anyone who's viewing, just so you know, I and my company, we adhere to the privacy laws. Here's the, it was PIPEDA, right? All the steps. So you go, even if you go onto our website, our public website is IDC, you'll see this is a statement that it doesn't say how we do it. It just says we follow the principles of privacy. And here's the 9 principles. And we, just so you know, Mr. and Mrs. Consumer, we adhere to those. So that's the second one. You don't really need one of those, but if you have a website, it makes good sense to have that. The third one is a privacy consent form. This is basically a one-pager, and we have this on the back page of our advisor disclosure template. So if you do a front and back print, if you're seeing, you're doing the old paper route, you would have this document on one thing, or if it's electronic, it's a 2-page document. And it allows your client to consent. So, Mr. Client, I'm going to collect your information. I'm going to collect health information from you. I'm going to collect financial information, identity information. I'm going to share it only with companies you decide to do business with and with relevant intermediaries such as MGAs. And here's how I'm going to protect it. And oh, by the way, if I die or become incapacitated or become permanently disabled, you allow me to transfer your file to another licensed advisor. That allows me to sell my practice or my family and estate to sell it. Or Mr. Advisor, Mr. Client, you can obviously choose your own advisor at that time, but I want to make sure you're served either way. That's a consent form that the client signs. And as soon as they sign that, you're good to go. So my opinion is that should be signed at the same time as right on your first meeting. Web meeting, send it to the client before the meeting. Hey, just so you know, here's my advisor disclosure. It's important that you know where I'm licensed, companies I represent, and here's my privacy consent form. Not in the first meeting, but if we decide to go into some work together, I'm going to be collecting information. I'll need you to sign that. So those are the 3 privacy documents I've seen, Brett.
Excellent. That's great, Eric. And that's really good just for clarification purposes for advisors there and their practices. So I'm glad we were able to address that. There is a theme developing with some of these questions. And so I'm going to ask the one that was asked from our friend Bob Scott, actually. And it's for any documents what documents are necessary in older client files? These are like the 10, 20 plus year old clients. Can you expand on that, Eric?
Yeah, I can say that predominantly right now, regulators and insurance companies are concerned about contemporaneous sales. So sales you've made in the last 24 months. And, I say that because, we use that expression, bigger fish to fry. The regulators and the carriers know that there's some advisors who aren't even doing the right documents today. So they're not so concerned about files 15 years ago. That ship has already sailed. The files are what they are. Hopefully you have good notes. And hey, it's fair game to go out and get a new disclosure signed. Like some people ask, how often do I have to get this thing signed for every sale? Well, no, the client knows who you are. If they're buying 2 products from you over a space of 3 years, your original signed disclosure suffices unless something's changed in your practice. But I wouldn't worry too much about those older files. I don't see any regulators saying, we want to have a look at sales you did 12 years ago. No, they're too busy looking at stuff going wrong right now. But what you do want to keep an eye on is if you do have an E&O claim, then, the E&O claim is something where, hey, what would I have to have in my file? So, when you're reviewing stuff with your clients, it's okay to review a policy they bought 12 years ago and just discuss the need, make sure they understood the need, things like that. That's a good thing to do as well.
Yeah, that's great. That's a good distinction to make for new business policies. It's really focused on abiding by these processes. Yeah. Eric, another 2-part question here, and I will separate the 2. But compliance, disclosure, and privacy are always done with individual clients. But what about group insurance?
Yeah, group insurance is not in that purview. So, you're fine without those. It's really the employer that is the customer here. And even that, the same rules, advisor disclosure applies for sure. You want to give one of those to your group insurance client, the owner, the employer. The needs analysis, that's really, and especially if you're working with our group division, David Emanuel and his team, they do all that fact-finding work that would be plenty of defense for you if something went wrong and a complaint ensued. So What we're talking about here with the approach is really individual sales where it's required.
And individual health and dental insurance, what can you speak to in that realm?
Yeah, that's another, specialty. It's a one-off product. Usually the consumer approaches the advisor for that and says, hey, I need some of this. Not really too much you can measure there. Most of the plans are set, do you want the basic, the standard, the advanced, deluxe, and the clients choose based on reading through the quotes. But what you do want to have in place is your engagement letter, because, that will tell the client, oh, by the way, this is a wonderful first step you've taken, but I also help people with critical illness insurance, disability insurance. I don't want to assume that you're covered for these things. So let's have a review and at least, cross that off our list that you're covered, or that we need to pay attention to this and do something about it.
Was that a little salesman tactic in you there, Eric?
Did it sound like that?
It did. That's great. I love that. So feel free to use that, guys. That's perfect. And you know what? It's turning into a three-parter. Sorry. So travel insurance, does that fall in the same realm here?
Yeah, travel insurance, the same. But on that front, let me just reverse the stakes here and say I've even seen advisors that their engagement letter says, here are the 6 or 7 things I do. I do family security with life insurance, critical illness insurance, disability insurance. I help people with business types of insurance, key man, wage loss replacement plans. I help with estate preservation, things like that. I do retirement planning. I don't do travel insurance. I don't do health insurance. If you're interested in those things, let me know and I'll refer you to someone. So just to kind of a plug there to make sure that, clients aren't relying, like you don't want a client sitting back going, well, if I needed health insurance or travel insurance, I'm sure my broker, Brett, would have told me, because he does everything. I give him money every month and he says everything's looked after. You want to make sure, okay, no, I helped you with this stuff, this other stuff. If you're interested, you need to find something, or I'll definitely refer you to a broker who does that.
Yeah, perfect, Eric. That's great. And I'm actually going to jump down the line a bit because this is a really good question. And I've been asked this quite a bit. I experienced this when I was at Manulife as a wholesaler as well. So I think it's very useful information for everybody on the call. Yeah. When we use DocuSign, does it matter where the advisor is geographically when they sign the document? So if they're out of the country, and also from a client perspective as well, expand on that, Eric, because that's a common question that
yeah.
we ask.
And by the way, I'm loving this format. I mean, I'm almost thinking next compliance webinar we should just do a Q&A.
Yeah,
it's keeping it real. So so there's a lot at play here, and a lot the industry is kind of realizing about this, because you can have instances of out of province business. You're licensed in Ontario, a client's residing in Alberta. Some of this is out of country, where the client's out of country. Recently we had a situation where the client's adult daughter, was spending 3 months in Mexico on a work term, working for a Canadian company, but they allowed her to be in Mexico while she was remotely working. And she wanted to open up a quick RSP for a home buyer's plan. And the carrier authorized that on a one-time basis, saying, yes, we understand the broker is licensed only in Ontario. We understand the client is presently sitting in Mexico, and we're going to allow that. So the best advice I can give, without trying to rhyme off every scenario, is check with your insurer. And on that note, I can say that Industrial Alliance has kind of shown the most creative thinking, because this is a battle of two powers, right? The one power is license and regulations. The other is fair treatment of consumers. And, some of these regulations were written decades ago when remote work wasn't even fathomed. And now some carriers are realizing that to have a client who's working in California and to restrict that client from receiving service and updates, subsequent deposits, doesn't really do that client a service. What, you're going to make the client find a broker in California now to help them with that? It doesn't make sense. So hopefully the regulators will start to draft some guidance on what they think is acceptable. But for now, whenever you have a situation, bounce it off your BDE, bounce it off the insurance carrier you're working with, and say, hey, can we get an exception? And they'll tell you yes or no. But make sure it's clear and make sure it's in writing. Don't, no slag against wholesalers, Brett, but don't just let your wholesaler tell you on the golf course, yeah, go ahead and write it. Like you want something in writing in an email that said, I was allowed to do this for this case, and have that in your client file.
Well, that's right. It's just transparency, I think, is the key takeaway with this answer here as well. So that's perfect there, Eric. Now I mentioned this in our processes question, but I think it's important for our Quebec advisors. Is a client engagement letter required for advisors in Quebec as well? Are there any different rules?
Yeah, because when you think about the approach, which again, if you Google the approach, you'll see this was a CLHIA, Advocates, IFB, CALBA initiative. And the easy way to remember it is it's how you approach a client and what, client documents you need to have in that client file that shows the client was fully aware of everything. I think it's very eloquent, the approach. It was created kind of by industry associations, but then the regulators looked at it and said, wow, like our act may not reflect all of these requirements, but we like them. And we think that's a good thing to have in the client file. And that's a good segue for this slide here, which is, I really have to say the approach. And so don't look at it as does Quebec require it or not? Look at it as the industry requires it. And this is a good point for me to state a little principle I've come up with, which is, who are the compliance authorities in our industry? And I call it the three wise men. So there's three separate compliance authorities you as an advisor need to keep your eye on. The first one is the regulator, obviously, your provincial regulator or the provinces you're licensed in. They have things you need to adhere to. The second is, and this one may surprise you, but your errors and emissions. I see a lot of advisors, too many, who pay this thing for decades, and they do it 5 minutes a year. They renew it. They never read what's covered, and they never realize the services they can avail themselves of. And also, if you're thinking of, say, an outside business activity, and they go, hey, is this allowed? Am I allowed to do this as well as my financial advisory business? Well, among the people you should be asking that question is your errors and emissions insurance. They'll pipe in and say, you know what? We have a problem insuring you if you're doing this type of outside business activity. We know we're not insuring that outside business activity, but if there's commingling of clients, we think there's some trouble here, and we might deny a claim if that occurred. So they're a compliance authority that you're free to check in with sometimes when you have questions about things, because they're the ones that are going to pay that $1 million claim that you get pronounced guilty for one day. So, they have skin in the game, and they will give you advice. The third authority is the insurance carriers you're contracted with. And believe me, they're different. They're all different. They'll all have something to bring to the table you should consider. And an example of where they're sometimes divergent is, for example, we know in the provinces of BC and Alberta, rebating is allowed. Okay? Fully allowed within the act, within the acts of those two provinces. But you will not find an insurance company that will ordain or bless you doing a rebate for a client. So you say, hey, I got a big case, $100,000 premium, but I got to give the client $25,000. Mr. Sun Life, Mr. Manulife, Mr. Canada Life, I just want to make you aware, they will all be silent. Now, they all may realize in those provinces those things happen, but expressly they say, we don't think rebating is good business. We don't think it's particularly conducive to fair treatment of consumers, so we don't allow it with our products. So there you have where an insurance company says one thing, the regulator says the other thing, and you have to respect both of them and go, well, if I want to keep my contract with XYZ insurer, I better, I got to realize that they're not down with rebating. I don't care what the province says. They're not down. This carrier is not down with rebating. That's just the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's perfect, Eric. And I'm just going to pause here for a second. There's a ton of amazing questions that continue to come in, guys. And if I'm missing your questions, I'm just trying to select the ones that I think would be most relevant for everybody on the call. Looking at the time now, I think we may just have time for one or two more, but we'll figure out a way to address some of these that haven't been answered yet. So Eric, I'll ask potentially the final question here, and just a reminder to the Quebec advisors, fill out the multiple choice question on the screen there. What kind of compliance regulation should we be aware of if we are advertising on social media for insurance leads? Is there anything different there?
So the main rules, and you know what, if you go to the search tab, like when you go onto IDC WIN Big and you click on search and you type in advertising, marketing, I think we have an article, and I think I published one in one of the weekly bulletins a few months ago on this topic. And, unlike the securities industry where it's, your dealer will dictate what you can put in and what you can state and not state, that's not so prevalent in the insurance business, which is principles based. So there's no hard and fast rules, but on that guidance piece, we have that you should not use carrier logos without expressed written permission by that carrier. You should not be describing specific, here, hey, I want to tell you on this social media post how Canada Life's critical illness insurance works. No, Canada Life has brochures for that. You can stick with that. Okay. You don't want to be rewriting their marketing material. So generally think about, okay, don't use carrier logos, don't use carrier names. I'm speaking in generic terms about the importance of life insurance, the importance of critical illness insurance. I'm not referencing specific products and strategies, because you and I both know, Brett, you can't sell on a post, right? At the end of the day, you can tease people's interest, but you can't describe a strategy. You want to do that in a meeting with someone. So keep it general and not, inflammatory, right? Don't be saying, hey, 12% rates of return and things like that. That's where you tend to get in trouble.
Yeah, that's key. And it's a great way to market yourself. But you really need to have that more in-depth conversation, do that needs analysis to find the best product. So that's perfect. And I'm just looking at time here. So I think we're going to wrap it up there. So Eric, are there any final comments that you wanted to address with the group before we let everybody go today?
Yeah, I think just, avail yourself of the tools that we have. I talk about this this suite of tools here. I know I'm just going to fast forward here. Think in terms of investing in your practice. And I know everyone's spend is different, but I also don't agree with the no spend model. Like that was the model I grew up in as an advisor. Yeah, all you need to do is print business cards. You're off to the races. No. Today, there's compliance requirements. There's cybersecurity requirements. You need to invest in some tools. Up on the screen here is where you see some of the tools that we think highly of. Equisoft is a CRM. They have some great allocation modules on that. One I don't have on the screen here is Razor. Of course, you know a lot about that, Brett, as a financial planning powerful tool. FSB powered by Advisor Stream, and we're actually we've been negotiating a discount on this. We have a manager of system procurement now. Fancy word. I didn't use her title correctly, but she's basically a person who that's literally her job, is to scour the market for the best tools out there based on needs that advisors have, not just, hundreds of great software, but where's the need for us? And she's doing a great job in procuring some discounts. And cybersecurity, like that price there, I think that's still current, is what it costs to lease a fully encrypted, fully backed up Iron Gate laptop from NPC on a monthly basis. So, just some of the I guess the buffet here of tools you can start to think about adopting in your practice.
Eric, thank you so much for today's presentation, and for all of you on the call, thanks so much. But we really appreciate the time. We had over 400 advisors on the call. And I think that just really speaks to, the knowledge and experience that you have, Eric, and however much these advisors appreciate and value your expertise. So wanted to thank you again, and for everybody that joined today, thank you so much. Reminder, in June, we are going to be talking about our child whole life policies and intergenerational wealth transfer strategies. So if that's relevant to your practice, watch for those emails and we'll see you then. Otherwise, take care, everybody, and thank you for coming.